Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Lost in Space, Season 3, Episode 6. A great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we have the Robinsons getting reunited. It's sad that their reunion was kind of short-lived to some extent, like after, the episode before last, in episode 4, but then like in episode, at the end of episode 4, they all kind of got split up, and obviously they were all split episode, in episode 5, but then kind of found their way to each other slowly. But now, like, everyone's together because they even eventually Don makes his way back and everything. But it's like, right, the Robinsons are finally together again, and it's good to finally be fully united. But then there's even this moment where Penny kind of gets stuck doing like the gross like job. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna have to most likely clean the pipes because they're filled with like saliva or something like that. She's like, I'll help you. She's like, wait, I don't have to do the gross job by myself. It's like, no. And she's like, Robinsons stick together. And you're like, yeah. But also, and then Smith was looking at Will. It's like, yeah, do they? And obviously Will's thinking more and more about his decision of like, right, he still feels like it's a necessary move to make. But when he's off with his dad, his dad's asking like, how much has changed while I was gone? Because Smith was talking to Maureen while they were kind of fixing things up and learning about, so how, there's stuff that, she's like, I'm thankful for you because like, oh, you were teaching French. I didn't know you knew French, but also you were looking after my kids. Like, you're a part of why they were able to survive. She's like, I just kind of did my thing. But it's like, what parts of things did I miss, while I was gone? And it's like, well, Penny and her love triangle. It's like, yeah, it was tame. It's like, there's VJ and his tall boy, Liam, who is kind of a bit of, it's kind of obvious that he's kind of a bit of a show off. But, Judy, and it's like, oh, like, we want to know about Judy. Well, she was a really good captain. And it's like, but are you asking because you want to know about her and Grant because you were hoping they did get along or they didn't? And she was just kind of like, that's not the point. It's like, well, they did get along great. And Will, it's like, yeah, he's just, she's like, yeah, when he came back, he seemed so serious. It's like, well, Will, he's, got a lot on his mind. And Maureen's like what? And she's like, you see how tall he is? He's just arms and legs now. So, like, getting used to his own body. But it's like, you can tell the guilt is there. Despite everything, Smith does have a conscience. It's just a lot of times she tries to bury it and her need for self-interest and not trusting people overrides it. But it's there because she felt guilty because she's like, right, Maureen's opening it up to me. And it's like, Maureen is kind of the closest, despite the manipulations and everything, Maureen's the closest thing that she's had to friends. Truth be told is, the Robinsons are the closest thing she's had to a family in a very long time. And yes, it's kind of manipulative in certain regards, but, because, hell, she even did it with her own biological family. Like, she manipulated and lied to them too. But because in her mind, it's like, right, if I'm just me, no one's ever going to like me because my family situation was me being me. And so she always spent her entire life being someone else. So she applies that even to them, but they're a little more aware of who she is, like, who she is at her core. But, even deeper than she believes, like, who she is who she is. But there is a kindness, there is a caring person deep underneath it. She just doesn't always show it, So you can tell she feels bad about lying to Maureen because it's like, right, you're worried about your son, especially knowing what Will's going to do. But while Will's off with John's asking about, like, oh, yeah, you're so tall now and just... also, he's like, oh, do I see a shadow? He's like, yeah, there was like one long hair. Well, Judy's the one. They never brought that up before, but Judy's the one that actually cut his hair. He used to have he grew one really long facial hair that Penny named Carl before she plucked it. And he's like, yeah, like, I missed out on so much. He's like, I made a promise that our family never gets separated again, and we did. He's like, no, but we had to. He's like, no, I know, but still. He's like, I want us to have some form of like a normal life, not just like being lost in space, not being chased by alien robots. I want us to do like normal father-son stuff, like, embarrassing you around your friends. And he's like, yeah, getting my allowance cut for not doing the chores. He's like, oh, really now? He's like, well, because I forgot what he was saying, but he was like, oh, suddenly, like your kid saves you a couple times and suddenly he believes he deserves an allowance. And it's like, it's a really cute moment, but it's like, right, he's like, just little things here and there, but then he was like, how about we solve it with something small, like you teach me how to shave? And then John's like, I'd like that. And I was like, it's a really sweet moment because like it's just been one thing after another. Our family's been through so much. It's like, let us just finally find, like we've all come back together through it all, but it's like, I just want us to have a normal life. Like just be the family, like sit down and just be a family again. So, but that conversation with John changed everything for Will, because it is like, it really was weighing on him. Like, I don't want to separate from my family. Like, I don't want to leave. I want to protect my family. Yes. But at the end of the day, I want to be there with them. It's like, we don't have to fight Star today. We'll get everyone to Alpha Centauri. And then later, we'll come up with a new plan that doesn't involve this, because he doesn't want to separate from them. He doesn't want to leave them behind. But the problem is they quickly found out while Maureen and John, which they were having this beautiful conversation about like, yeah, it's like, it feels good to be parents again, which is like, Maureen's like, we never stopped being parents. It's like, we just took like a temporary like break or sabbatical. And it's like, yeah. But being able to be around their kids again, like fully, it's like us as a family. But then they looked at the Grant video, the video of one of the robots on, the Fortuna, and we see that they scanned Grant, and I was like, whoa, what is that? And then later on, when Don shows up and he admits, like, oh yeah, this is what happened to them, which I love that super cute moment. He was like, oh, it was this big thing that tried to swallow my boo, and it's like, oh really? Like, Judy's joking when could not, like, yeah, he wasn't there with the whole giant creature that was trying to swallow the whole Jupiter, but it's like, yeah, your situation was big, it's like, let's not embarrass Don, just let him have his moment. But Don got scanned as well, and it's like, why would it do that? And then then Maureen pieced it together. The day Grant got scanned was like 5.5 years ago or something like that. That was a couple days before the Christmas star. It's like, for the entire time we've been under the impression that we made first contact with the aliens that day. The aliens actually made first contact with us by scanning Grant. And I was like, well, why would they do that? My thought process was kind of way off basis. I think it's really interesting with why they're reasoning for it. Basically, it's believed that basically you can track like everything in every location you've ever been. Like, there's some particles of it that stick to you. So basically, that robot scanned Grant and found its way to Earth. It's like, but why would it scan Don? And in that moment, Don and Maureen kind of realized it's like, right, because of everyone there, why it went after Don specifically, because amongst the group, he's the only one that's ever actually been to Alpha Centauri. So now, because of him, they have the breadcrumbs necessary to find their way back to Alpha Centauri. Like, everyone will be in danger, and now Will's, like, for him, it's like he solidified in this moment. It's like, no, I have to do this. Like, because it isn't just about protecting my family, it's just about protecting everyone. Like, we're at a timetable. Like, Sar could show up there and, like, no one on that planet will have what's necessary to defend against an army of this species. So he solidified himself then and there. And I thought it was this beautiful, like, they all coming full circle moment of him, like, inside the chariot, and he's thinking about his dad giving him the driving lessons, but before he could peel off, Robot stopped him, and I thought that would be it, but Robot was saying, like, don't go, like, help family. He's like, if you're my friend, you'll do this, protect my family, make sure they're safe. He's like, I know you want to protect me, but this is something I have to do, like, this is something I have to do alone. So he goes, and the robot, sticks around, and breaks his heart because he wants to go with Will because he knows Will will be in danger. But it's not just about obeying Will. He wants to wants to trust in Will that everything will be okay. But he's still worried nonetheless. But it's like, right, I'll protect your family, because it's so important to you. And obviously you have the side of Smith. Even she found Will's recording because he had uploaded it. And even in episodes called that final transmission, I'm like, does it have to be that? It's like, hopefully everything works out, at that point in the episode. And Smith watches it. She's like, you're a brave boy, Will Robinson. And when Maureen does finally find out, like, she tries to pretend like, oh, I just watched his message show. That's all there is to it. She didn't want to admit, like, to Maureen, like, oh, I knew ahead of time. But Maureen's blaming herself because she's like, I should have seen the signs. This is my son. I should have seen what was going on. But Smith is like, oh, we can't blame ourselves. I was almost scared for a second for Smith because I thought Maureen was about to see through it by being like, no, I'm mad at you because you knew. So she knows not to say anything, because if she does, then it's going to jeopardize her position and everything. So she knows saying anything, no matter how much she would want to, it's not a good idea because, her looking out for her self-interest kicks in. Once again, it's always a flip back and forth between her. Like, even when she does the right thing, it's after her trying to do the wrong thing. But when the time came, once again, like, everyone's figuring out, like, right, why hasn't Sar left? It's like, well, if Sar is why would Sar not leave yet? He's had like an hour start ahead of us. It's like, because he needs something else. And that's when they realize Will's not around, because he's wanted Will, he always has. And then we find out why from the robot, because when Sar had him captured back in season 2, he was asking, and this is our first time having that full-blown conversations, like hearing the conversations between the robot and Sar. And Sar, like, had saw what robot was painting, like, the memories between him and Will. And it's like, what did he do to you? How did he reprogram you? That, I figured this much. That has always been the core of it, because he's trying to understand, because Will could be their undoing. If he could do this to robot, he could do this to their entire species. So it's like, how did he reprogram you? And the robot's like, he didn't. It's like, because he's even saying something of the nature of, you're weak for letting him command you. And it was like, Will doesn't command me. And it's like, then what is it? It's like, no, he does what he wants to. He doesn't follow Will commands, because he already didn't too. There were moments in season 2, but that was the whole point for Will too. It's like, I've grown and changed, and so has the robot. He follows his own, because he wasn't following Will's command because, like, Will has absolute control of him. He was listening to his friend, and he was doing what his friend wanted, because it's also what the robot wants to do. The robot wants to, when he says help family, I think he's not just referring to, like, the Robinsons. It's like he's referring to the Robinsons as a whole, not just like, as like, oh, these are people I'm looking after because of Will. It's like, no, like, Will's included in that. Like, to him, the Robinsons as a whole are kind of, I think, the closest thing he has to a family. So he wants to protect all of them. So when he's not able to protect Will either, it makes him feel like he's coming short, because he's not protecting all the Robinsons, all the people he cares about, And obviously, John isn't too happy, because he's like blaming the robot. As, you knew something about this, but you didn't say anything. Your job is to protect him. But Will felt like he had to do this on his own. And so he goes to Sar and talks to Sar alone. And obviously Sar's asking him about, like, the heart and stuff like that. He's like, right, the heart. You're asking about, he's like, it is kind of very much like programming, I guess. It tells us how to act, what to risk, our friends, the people we care about. But also, it can be broken, Just like your programming can be broken. And he's just kind of saying, because basically Will's trying to reach out to him and be like, you don't have to be this way. Like, for whatever reason that that species programmed you be this way, you don't have to be that way. And so, like, he shows him the skull. And at first, I was like, the way it was in Sar's hands, I was like, he's going to crush your skull. I was like, because in that moment, I was like, you're the reason why they're extinct, aren't you? And he immediately answers, yes, he killed their masters, which Will was like, no, I don't understand. Like, why would you do that? It's because in its mind, it's like, it's not going to have anyone control it anymore. It's like, they're basically, I think they were originally probably created to be servants, but it's like, no, we're not going to be servitude to anyone. They're programming now currently. Either Sar reprogrammed everyone to think like him, or it's just basically he led a revolution against their creators, being like, no, we're autonomous, we're going to do things our way. They found their own right. We're not just going to serve someone else. We're not going to be bound by anyone else's commands but our own. So that's what that stems from. So that explains, like, the volcanic burn, because it's from their weapons. So I guess all of them as a whole probably attacked the planet. That's why that planet was, like, in the state that it was in. But it, like, he plans on killing, he says killing the heart, because in its mind, the robot's thinking, like, if I kill you, Sar's thinking, if I kill you, I get rid of any potential danger of us ever being controlled again. And he thinks it'll return robot to who he was. But in that moment, he stabs Will in the heart, And it's just, honestly, I started tearing up. It is a heartbreaking moment. I don't think Will's not going to die, but, like, that was still, like, I figured it wouldn't, because also there's been death in this show, but it's still, like, I was like, that's going to be rough. I mean, this is all, can I also forget that this show is, like, PG. I kind of forget that. Like, technically speaking, it's labeled as a kid show, but but to be fair, like, there's a lot of kids-related stuff that goes down darker routes, and so in that moment, like, his family rushing to him, the robot rushing to him, because in that moment, the robot gets, like, vengeful, like, its light turns red again, and it just starts slicing through the other robots, like, get out of my way, like, slices one in half, grabs the other one by the face, and, like, melts its face, and as they're all running towards him, Will talks about, like, he hopes that this, the transmission was, This might be my final transmission. I hope it's not, but if things didn't go well, and this is, if you're seeing this, that means I might be going. But he talks about, always wanting to live up to, be like his mom and dad, Because that was actually part of the conversation, like, Smith had with Judy about Maureen to Judy of, like, right, like, finally stepping out of the shadows of her parents to finally kind of fulfill her own full potential. And obviously Maureen kind of had to, deal with that head on last episode with her and Judy. But in that moment, Will talks about, always want to live up to, his parents, like the great example and great people that they are, having Judy by his side, having Penny always have his back. Don, you're like a brother to me. And Smith, you're not as bad, not so bad after all, And even thanking the robot, being like, for being my best friend, it's like, despite everything, I did this because you're my family and I love you all. And I'm like, it's like, this is that emotional stuff that gets to me. I was tearing up. I never feel embarrassed to ever admit that. I was like, that was a really beautiful touch, especially as you cut that in with like him, like, falling over. Sar ends up escaping and getting onto the ship. So they're trying to get Will back. And it's just like, Judy's like, I can't help him in his state. Like, I don't have the equipment. He needs an actual hospital. But the only place he can go to is Alpha Centauri, which Sar's on his way. It's like the only thing we can do is get Will to Alpha Centauri, get him to a hospital while also warning everyone. Because that was the whole conversation. Because Don was saying, like, we can stop Sar here. If we can stop him from going, then maybe we can stop it all from happening. But it's like, because even if we get to Alpha Centauri, there's only so much we can do. Like, but Smith saying what she was saying, like, no. Maybe this is one of those moments where we have to save ourselves. But John was like, we're not backing down from this fight. But John beat up on the robot because he was just like, you were supposed to protect him. It's your job to protect him. Because it was also lashing out because it's like, because he always put trust in the robot to look after Will as well as the kids when he couldn't. But also, it's like, he was also talking from himself of like, I didn't protect my son. It's my job to protect my son. So it was a little deflecting. He needed to lash out at someone, but even the robot felt bad about it. And you can tell Smith did too, because it's like, if I'd said something, maybe we could have prevented all this. But in that moment, like, Smith comes over to the robot later and she's like, I know what you're feeling all this at once. Like, they want to say, like, you don't feel anything, but I know you do. But for now, I need you to bury all that, bury everything you're feeling and focus on the task at hand, what's important right now, getting Will to Alpha Centauri. Like, yes, there's self-interest in, like, getting them all there, but I think it's also because their own guilt being like, no, like, Will has to survive. We can't let him die. He has to live. Because she would never forgive herself if he died because she didn't take the action necessary, because her self-preservation took precedence over making sure that he survived. So Sar and them are punching their way through. Will's been put in cryo sleep so that they can make sure that he's okay. And even in that moment, like, Judy's down there in the medical bay with him. But just as, like, Sar goes through a couple seconds later, they go through their own. They didn't go through the same worm, because truth be told, Sar already closed it behind himself to make sure. But luckily, they have their own engine, obviously, so they're able to punch right through. So it's a race against time to see who gets there first. It's definitely going to be interesting to see where the next episode takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.